Muzzy things. And I actually wonder if the fact that it is Navi on the side that can get a little bit of a laugh out of him, can get a little bit of a smile, will change the way he thinks about these games.
That's his kryptonite, is having
friendship.
Fun. Yeah, friendship is his weakness all along.
Oh, poor NA players. So jumping into game one, Muzzy is going to be queuing up the Shadowhawk Shaman and Navi has the Death Rattle Hunter. Tell us a little bit about this matchup, Derek, and what each player is trying to do.
So this is something, this is a matchup that I came into this tournament pretty heavily siding on the Death Rattle Hunter's side, and I would still say that. It's a pretty good matchup because Shadowhawk is a relatively slow control, anti-control deck. Whereas Death Rattle Hunter is something that preys very heavily on that. You get down an early egg, you have Rexar, Katharina, all these cards that are very difficult to deal with. But we've actually pretty consistently seen the Shadowhawk Shaman edging out this matchup because of the fact that while it is a control deck, it can just function as a curve deck. If you can get Keleseth into Chain Gang, Swampoos, the Gluttonous Ooze, all these other minions that you throw down on curve, you can just dominate the board against Death Rattle Hunter.
And I think the other thing we do see as well, especially in this tournament setting, is the pros play Shadowhawks a little bit differently to what you would see in your average game, your average player. Yep. They have a much better sense for when they should pull the trigger, regardless of whether or not the combo has been fully assembled or even partially assembled.
Very good point.
They can transition to that tempo game if the right battle cry is already in the pool and if the game state requires it.
And that has eternally been the mark of a good combo deck in Hearthstone. All the decks that have very rigid combos where you can only go for them once you've assembled all the pieces of the combo tend to not be that powerful. Case in point, APM Priest, the Boar OTK Priest with Topsy-Turvy, it's proven to not find a spot in the meta because it's such a rigid deck. You need all pieces of the combo for the deck to function at all.
And even if you do assemble them all, of course, you still have to do the APM portion
that is true.
Of the piece, which proves to be tricky more often than not. But focusing on the game here, Muzzy has a few options on turn 3. The far side I love here. It's the most obvious option, and it pulls out the Ziliax, discounting it down to 2, which is a nice little anti-aggro tool, and can deal with that Gluttonous Ooze on the board very easily.
I like the decision there from Muzzy, like you said, to go for the far side, because the consideration to develop minions instead of it, which is always something to consider, I don't think is worth doing against this Death Rattle Hunter, because Mind Control Tech is such a dominant card in this matchup. This is really the way that Muzzy is looking to completely lock down board control. Because if you do want to go for Q into any play, into any Death Rattle activator, you kind of necessarily have to play into the Mind Control Tech in order to make that play.
Absolutely. So Muzzy, with that discounted Ziliax that he obtained off the far side, has put that down on the board and picked up really the best card he could have from the deck to pair with it. The only 2-drop being the Keleseth, a very strong term for Muzzy. And with double Mind Control Tech, the Zola, and Healing Rain all in hand, he must be feeling somewhat confident that he can win this game.
Big decision here for Muzzy as to whether he kills off the egg off this turn, which is definitely worth considering. If you're expecting Terrascale or Play Dead, then it's worth killing that off. But the fact that the play on the last couple turns for Navi was to go coin egg into Ooze, that's pretty unlikely that he's got the necessary activators to actually get those 5/5. So I like this decision from Muzzy.
Yeah, I think the other thing from Muzzy as well there is if you slow play it and show that you're thinking, it probably throws Navi off the scent a little bit as to whether or not Mind Controls are in hand. So Muzzy putting the Zola down on this turn and the Keleseth coming out a second time. That's +2/+2 to all minions left in the deck. That is a spicy turn.
That means every Saronite chain game from here on in is 2 Chillwind Yetis with Taunt for 4 mana.
And
that is how you win board.
That's giving me chill right now, just thinking about it.
Gets the juices flowing, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Oh, God. So NaviOOT has got a bit to think through, and you can see it written all over his face. The Grizzly here is a card that you want to get down at some point, and of course blocks all the face damage presented by those minions on the board. But it is kind of slow in terms of pushing pace, pushing pressure, and that could lead him to think about other things like, is Carnivorous Cube a good play here? Do you want to take the chance on Houndmaster Shaw sticking, given there's only 4 damage on the board? What are you reading?
This is really nearly for Navi an incredible hand, which is clearly what's causing him some amount of pain here. As if he could get Witchwood Grizzly this turn, Cube Play Dead on the next turn, that is kind of the dream here, because that is a very difficult board for Shudderwock Shaman to deal with. Volcano, Lightning Storm doesn't get the job done. So he's kind of considering this here, I think, by going for a Witchwood Grizzly and hoping to get the Death Rattle Activator in the next couple turns.
The Forest of Grizzlies is a scary prospect.
It is indeed.
On Muzzy's side here, turn 6 is usually a pretty nice turn for the Shudderwock Shamans for a couple of reasons. One, you can get Grumble online, but secondly, there are a lot of 3-drops run in the deck, so they often find a chance to kind of start emptying your hand. And it looks like Muzzy has put the Manatide Totem down, and now with freezing of the Grizzly, should be able to ensure its survival for another turn.
And if he could find himself a play dead now, this would be a very, very powerful turn for Navi indeed, because I guess the unspoken thing here is he is still leaving himself open to mind control tech, but all the power plays for Navi kind of mandate that. He has to be leaving himself vulnerable to mind control tech at some point, as ugly as it sounds.
So yeah, this is what Navi's weighing up. Playing around mind control tech and then playing around those hexes. Those hexes and I believe one Earthshock in the deck. If Navi just pulls the trigger and goes on this Carnivorous Cube now, it's a very high upside play with that Terracell Stalker already in hand. But if Muzzy has any of those answers that we're talking about, this could just lead to defeat.
Which is the point where Navi needs to assess how bad of a spot am I in here? Do I need to make incredibly risky plays to win the game? I don't think he is in that bad of a spot, and I don't think he will assume that he's in that bad of a spot. So I anticipate not that desperate plays from Navi, which is exactly what we see here. This doesn't make a risky play where he has to dodge the mind control tech or the hex to win. This is just a decent play here to set up for a more powerful play next turn.
I really do like the Handmaster Shore though. Yeah. I think it's one of those cards where if you can plonk it down and there's a decent chance that it cannot be answered, you're in a really good spot, especially with the cube in hand. And the ability to Terracell Stalker and, you know, just push a lot of damage into the minions. And this is an interesting card in this matchup because generally it's not that useful, but given that Muzzy has double buffed the Kelesiths, minions become so much more important, that fighting for board becomes so much more important. So a Houndmaster Shore stick could be very useful for Navi.
That's a really, really good point, because all the while Muzzy relies on going minion for minion, it means his removal cards become less powerful. Volcano in particular, because if he's just fighting with his minions, he doesn't want to destroy his own half of the board in this matchup. So it means Navi can extend the Volcano further and further away, which gives him more time to set up eggs and Carnivorous Cubes to give him the resilience to Volcano later on in the game.
That Life Drinker coming down onto the board, 4 mana for 5/5 of stats, and of course that damage dealt being put into the pool for Shudderwock, very powerful. Navi a little bit to think through now, and he's, if anything, he wishes that that Life Drink had 6 attacks so he could just get this cube down and get it destroyed, but not going to be the case. Kelesith instead leading the turn out, and I think he's now weighing up as to how he finishes this one out. He realizes that if he uses the Terracell Stalker here, and I seem to not be able to say those two words together at all. It's been tripping me up all weekend. If he puts that on the board, with the way these trades work out, he'll actually be left with 4 minions. So he might have to do something suboptimal, like throw the Kelesith into the Life Drinker in order to keep that board size under 4.
Or even have gone for...
Oh, sorry, there is a much cleaner way to do it, of course, which is 3+2.
Yeah, I was looking at cube on that turn on the egg, which I think is also worth considering, but then cube and an egg is clearly not what he wants to do in this matchup. He wants to go cube on Houndmaster Shore or the charged Devilsaur in the ideal world. But by throwing away the Terrascale Stalker, that's how you pronounce it, by the way.
Terrascale Stalker.
It weakens the power of Carnivorous Cube somewhat anyway. So no matter what play Navi went for there, I think this was the best way to go about it because it plays around the mind control tech so effectively. It's still not leaving him with the real power plays open.
I think the other thing to point out as well is the reason that cube has been held onto is because of the threat of Hex and Earthshock.
Yes,
and if you weren't going to play it on turn 5, you wouldn't play it now, given that you can't just instantly activate it. Muzzy still has 4 cards on those first 4 cards in his hand have not been played since those early turns. So there's a decent chance it's that hard removal that Navi's trying to dodge.
Navi here finally going to be playing into the mind control tech because he says now, you know what, if you got it, buddy, go for it. I do not mind. He has to steal pretty much exactly Houndmaster Shore or King Crush to be able to actually fight back against this board so effectively. And if any other options are taken, Na'Vi can quite happily just push for the win.
Now, Navi's unfortunately going to get the news that it's not one mind control tech he has to worry about, it's two. And that does increase the odds of both getting the Hellmaster Shore and the King Crush. And he can, of course, follow this up with a heal as well on that Healing Rain. So Muzzy here is going to play the second one, no doubt, and really needs to hit Shore or King Crush. Hits the King Crush. That is a big pull, and the crowd knows it too. You can hear him going up.
So does that mean he has to go Earth Shock on the Katharina and then trade away both the relevant minions?
Because I'm just trying to think, like, from really Muzzy's perspective, do you have to heal? I think you're right. You probably don't have to, but he's going to take the safe play anyway.
Katharina's only really scary on this turn if it pulls out exactly Charged Devil Saw. And Muzzy here is saying if you actually want to pull that out, the effect can't go through to face. And even if you were to see Katharina go face, then play dead on it to pull out the Charged Devil Saw, that's still only 14 damage on this turn. Even with the hero power, Muzzy's surviving. And I think he's figured out there's pretty much nothing on this turn that can kill him, even in the absolute worst case scenario.
So the Deathstalker Rexa is a very interesting draw there. It does actually give Na'Vi some easy ways to clear off that King Crush, but choosing by the looks of it not to go that line, pulling out the Beast first so he won't see it in the tracking, and then finds the Terrasail Stalker. And this is a game plan that Na'Vi have been thinking about from early turns. The cube comes out, now the Stalker, he's building this Grizzly Forest that we talked about. This
is exactly what we were talking about, you are right. The 12 health is just too much for Muzzy to deal with. The lines don't add up, but Shudderwock off the top does have 2 mind control techs, battle cries, stored away in it, so we could see now. You know, you trade away the 1/1, I suppose, so that there's none of your minions dying when you steal them, but then just go for a double steal.
Yeah. I really like this tempo Shudderwock. And it looks like Muzzy does too, because that appears to be the line he's pursuing here. What a series of draws between these two players.
Absolutely nuts. If he can steal one Witchwood Grizzly, there's like nothing that he ever dies to. He's going for it here. I absolutely love
Wow, Na'Vi is not happy with that. He pulls the Grizzly. It then gets Zolid by Shudderwock. Kel'Thuzad coming out. That's 4 Kel'Thuzad that'll be in the pool at the end of this turn. The other pool there on Terrasail Stalker, probably one of the better ones. You don't want to lose the cube. You don't want to lose the other Witchwood Grizzly. But Na'Vi's also going to see the Earth Shock there, meaning there will be no more Grizzlies out of that cube.
And this was just looking so good for Na'Vi. On that turn when he went for the Katharina, I think that was the perfect opportunity to stop playing around mind control tech, but it has just not worked out for him. The double MCT for Muzzy that he held on to right from the start of the game was really the key decision that led to him winning this pretty unfavorable game.
Yeah, I just think that's a really tricky one for Na'Vi because look at the players laughing at each other. I love that. I love the camaraderie. But just on how the way that early game played out, effectively Na'Vi had to weigh up what of the choices of Muzzy's can I play around.
Yeah.
And the mind control techs, the hexes, the Earthshocks, he decided the mirror match between these two druids. Yeah. And I say mirror, I mean in class only. The decks are quite different.
They are indeed. The Taunt druid was kind of eclipsed, I think, by the Malagos druid in the shift from Witchwood meta into Boomsday meta. When people quickly realized you want to play Flute as much as possible, and that means you can't play Oaken Summons, that kind of pushed away from the Taunt druid variant a little bit. But it kind of made a resurgence because Malagos druid was so popular. It's a really nice matchup, I find, for the Taunt druid, where you can gain enough armor to outlast their burst. And in the later stages of the game, they have no response to your large board of taunts.
So, very nice. Muzzy picking up that wild growth there. I was going to say his hand didn't look that bad with just the double nourish, but the wild growth there is huge.
It's insane.
Na'Vi's hand has been pretty good early on too. Unfortunately, drawing the second Ironwood Golem makes that Oaken Summons dead in hand.
Yes.
Which is unfortunate, but wild growth into nourish is still what you're looking for. And if you can pick up something like an Oakart early on, this is exactly how the Taunt Druid wins. It can just go much faster and push that pressure, which the Malagos Druid just can't deal with.
There is a reason why Oakart, well, this deck became a little bit of a meme for a while with, if you play Oakart early on, you win. It's because it's true. If you play Okar early on, you will just be winning that game of Hearthstone. And Nourish is so key in the taunt. With the fact that they play, I think, literally 0, 6, or 7 mana cost cards in this deck, you have to bridge that 2 mana gap with Nourish, which is exactly what NaviOOT has done here.
So Muzzy here has a pretty average-looking hand, and I would not be surprised at all to see this Nourish draw for more cards. Yeah. And is he going to find anything of interest off the top here? So the combo pieces are in hand.
Actually,
that's pretty good.
Yeah.
But they're not great to be played at the moment, and he is still looking for, I think, more cycle at the moment. So it's getting there. It's not there. There is still big chance for Navi to bring this one home.
It's getting very close for Muzzy. If he can find himself Dream Petal or Twig in the next couple of turns, I'd say this is actually looking very good for Muzzy, because he has the Plague to deal with this wide board of dragons from NaviOOT. He just needs to be able to go for a big swing turn in the form of Malagos Swipe. I'm not certain that Malagos into fluked Malagos Swipe is good enough, but at the moment, that's Muzzy's best chance of taking this game.
That was a very awkward draw he just got in the UI. It's one of those cards which you love having in this matchup, but he needs to dump cards from hand to make room for it, and there's nothing really obvious you want to dump from your hand. The Spreading Plague is absolutely vital to stall out later against some of those big taunt boards. The Mind Control tech you want to be using maybe off that first or second Hydronox to steal some minions. And the Moonfire is, of course, a combo piece. The Jasper Spellstone does nothing at the moment.
Yes.
Just an awkward turn.
Yeah, this hand really is a whole lot of nothing at the moment. For Muzzy, this is just why you so rarely see Nourish being used for draw. It's just always for ramp in Malagos Druid, because so much of the deck is that card draw.
If you're in Navi's shoes, you must be pretty confused by what that turn was. Like
what
for Malagos to Hero Power and pass on 8 is very strange. That's not something you see very often.
All kind of alarm bells will surely be ringing, but it does not deter Navi from playing the 4 minions. He was punished for it last game, and while this is pretty good for Muzzy, it's far from game-winning just yet.
That is the best pull that he could have gotten, bar none. Muzzy has had great fortune with these mind control techs so far, and while it's easy to say, you know, luck's on his side, the reality is he's teched in more mind control techs than the field for this exact type of meta where 4 minions on board is very common.
And now I think for Navi, as he is running the list, as I just checked, with only 1 Sleepy Dragon, this is the final dragon pulled from his deck now. So that Dragon Hatcher is not only a bad draw because it makes the Master Oak worse, it's just a 9 mana 2/4 now. This is clearly a decent board for Navi because he's got a nice big board in play, he ramped up quickly, but these draws are starting to get pretty dire actually. The recruit effects have just come in all the wrong order.
And people at home must be asking, well, why is he only running one of these when you can have situations like this? Navi's list is, I guess, effectively a not very greedy
Very anti-aggro, yeah.
Given the current meta, much more aggressive decks expected, this is a less greedy list that can still win those control matchups, but have a little bit more game, and it can run into these awkward positions as a result.
And we do see here Muzzy saying, okay, I have no guarantee that Twig or, to an even greater extent, Dream Petal Florist are coming anytime soon. Let's get this rolling now. If you don't have the Naturalize, my Malagos might even stick on the board, and then Fluke Malagos Swipe is really just game-breakingly winning for Muzzy.
So Navi's got 2 draws here to find that Naturalize. The Spellstone is not one. The Wild Growth is going to be required here. He could also hit Nourish and dig for more through card draw off the top. It's the Cube. That is not what he was hoping for.
It does let him kind of play around Malagos Swipe.
It does. You trade in to the Primordial Drake, you play the Cube, and then when the Swipe comes out, it pops the Cube, bringing those Sleepy Dragons back out at your disposal. But the other thing is, with just 1 Cube in the list, a less greedy version, it's normally something you want to be holding onto as a potential activator for Hydronox when it comes back off the Witching Hour. So by committing it now, you do forego having the ability to use it later, but when the board state is the way that it is, Navi just has to find a way to survive the next few turns, and that's exactly what we see with this line of play here.
I think this is a sad but necessary evil for Navi to throw down this cube, because he knows it doesn't matter about Hadronox. He needs to do something right now or the game is just over. After Muzzy playing out the Malagos, there's a very good chance that he has Floop in hand. I think that would be way too risky of a play if he didn't have it. And, I mean, for Muzzy on this turn, he could hold back the Floop into Swipe because his opponent has clearly demonstrated he has no copy of Naturalize quite yet. Which isn't actually the worst idea. He wants to have the ability to deal with a wide board.
So you considering UI as an alternate line to just playing Floop, Swipe, Moonfire, keeping in mind that Swoop and Moonfire is 25 damage all up now?
That sounds quite good, that line,
yeah,
actually.
It does.
Yeah, I was kind of considering maybe Malfurion as the other line, take it slow and then swipe away a big board. But if he can find himself another Moonfire or Swipe here, the game's just over anyway.
Oh, this is also interesting.
Just a Moonfire.
So if Muzzy now waits... Oh, okay, he's not going to. But with double Naturalize, you can effectively use the Swipe the next turn and then kill both dragons with your Naturalizers. But Muzzy's committing to the line here, and NaviOOT is going to need some help if he's going to get through this one. So Moonfire coming down here, going straight to Navi's face, puts him down to 8. Needs to find a way to answer this board, otherwise it's going to be all she wrote. And that's...
killed off one of them.
It's just not enough though. You need to be able to remove both if you're in Navi's shoes. The UI, I guess not. The UI...
You don't have to, yeah.
The UI from here only does 10, so it's the Swipe Moonfire you're worried about.
Yeah.
But UI does have a chance of getting the other Moonfire out of the deck at this point.
And this does mean now that...
Did he find a way to clear?
Yeah, he's got the full clear. Like, I was looking at considering maybe UI over this anyway, because it makes your next turn so much more powerful. But the fact that you get to keep both your Sleepy Dragons here alive... And with the swipe off the top, Muzzy was so close to just winning the game on the last turn with the Malagis. He, I suppose, wouldn't have had the mana to go for the full combo. But
I think there'll be a fair bit of Navi error going on in chat because it looks like he has stabilized from this position and should be able to get the win here. Muzzy is likely to throw all damage left at face, but he may be considering whether or not Malfurion down this turn and figuring out if there's some way he can push through that makes more sense than just trying to throw damage to face.
And, you know, this is the fear for Muzzy's line. The fact that he went all damage to face clearly leaves him vulnerable to a potential clear on the Malagoses, Malagai, whatever the plural may be. And it's gone wrong for him. The clear was there, the taunt wall is made, and now Muzzy needs to find a way to get through these taunts, which his line did not allow him to do.
There's Hadronox, one of the key cards in this matchup, but unlikely to be needed. And although we do say that, we have seen Malagos Druids commit the early Malagos, have it cleared, and still find ways to win. So Navi still has to be on top of his game to close this one out.
The health totals were just so awkward for Muzzy because even if he had gone Moonfire on the cube and then swipe face, that's only 11 damage to each of the Sleepy Dragons. That doesn't actually clear them off with the +10 spell damage on board.
I think the other problem is if you commit that much damage to the board, which is effectively you Moonfire and just swipe into the board, how do you actually win from there? Maybe the consideration was whether he should have waited another turn or played the UI instead to dive through the deck first. So Muzzy throwing out those Naturalizers now is going to mill Navi a card, and I'm guessing he's hoping to get Hadronox out of the deck,
that's
but
the idea.
he cannot see that it's in hand.
Getting rid of Spellstone and Ferocious Howl. Yeah, he was just hoping for Witching Hour or Hadronox. Both would give him a very real shot in this game. But I'm starting to think that unless fatigue starts to become a factor for Navi, which I find unlikely because, again, there's still armor gain from the Oaken Summons, believe another Branching Paths as well later on in the deck. He should be able to armor up to a point where fatigue isn't a real concern.
Yeah, that's exactly right. While Muzzy does have the Malfurion, which is obviously much better than Navi's raw hero power in fatigue, he's also ahead on cards. There's realistically not much in terms of how Muzzy can clear the first Hadronox wave and then a second Hadronox wave. And the first one may be able to be cleared with the Death Pact, I believe it's called, from the Lich King. Is it Death Pact or Sack
Doom
Pact?
Pact.
Doom Pact. I always get that wrong every time. So double Doom Pacts is realistically the only way he can clear it, and then if he has double Doom Pacts, the better hero power into fatigue, that would be one way of doing it. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Navi respect this Lich King, and that's exactly how it plays out, the Naturalize coming down.
Yeah, I like this a lot from Navi. There was some consideration to hold back the Naturalize for his own Hadronox, but he's realizing here, if he just dominates the board immediately with his own taunts, he doesn't need to worry about killing off his Hadronox immediately, because he will just be ahead on board. He can just play Hadronox here behind these taunts at some point, and Muzzy will have no recourse to kill him immediately.
Navi pulling the Doom Pack that we were talking about, and we saw that used to great effect in Taunt Druid at the start of the day when Fairley managed to eke out a win from an unfavored spot with Tyler by combining it with Witching Hour. It's something that you don't expect to happen, but is absolutely within the realm of possibilities once Lich King comes down.
And it could actually be pretty sick here. If the board enters an even board state with maybe a big play from Muzzy with Spreading Plague into Branching Paths, and it looks like maybe he'll burst through with a Starfire. Once you're out of cards in your deck anyway, Witching Hour Doom Pact is pretty much a locked game at that point.
Now, people at home may be wondering why Muzzy is playing this one so slowly and really thinking about these turns, and I think this is one of the things that does make Muzzy so good. He finds ways to win from really unfavored positions. He's sitting there, and if you were to ask him what his chance of winning now, he knows it's really low.
Yeah, it's
but
very
the
low.
fact that he can sometimes find wins in these situations is part of what makes him so great, and that's why he plays these out.
Yeah, with the second Naturalize picked up, though, that is Navi's perfect time to throw down this big old taunt wall and say to Muzzy, you had better have the perfect answer to this, like I said, in Spreading Plague into Branching Paths, and then maybe Muzzy has Anti-Magic Shell from where Navi is sat. That's where things could potentially go wrong. Muzzy knows it's not there, though, and that is going to be a surprise equalization for Navi.
You say surprise. What was surprising?
Okay, going into the series, going into that game, I would say Navi had the lead. Muzzy got pretty much the dream hand with Wild Growth into 2 Nourishes, the #1 point earner in Americas for the first time in 3 years.
It's surprising.
It is.
In a way, it's surprising. In another way, it's not. Like, for me, Justine has always been an awesome player.
I agree.
I've loved watching Justine play in tournaments, and then also his stream, one of the most educational streams, well explained, that I've ever had the pleasure of watching. But I think the thing that's held Justine back a little bit, and he'd probably agree with this himself, is his work ethic when it comes to dedicating himself to Hearthstone. Tempo Storm and Muzzy, as both a teammate and a competitor, have really pushed him to the next level when it comes to that, and speaks to part of the reason why he's been successful. And I think that will help Muzzy too. Muzzy yesterday was kind of coy about, you know, wanting to be #1, wanting to be the best, but that really is his ultimate goal. And while he would never voice that, and I think a lot of the other top pros wouldn't necessarily voice it either, it is what carries them forward.
Yeah, that competitive stride. It's rare in life that you get the opportunity to be the best in the world at anything, especially such a big esport as Hearthstone. It's something you do not pass up.
So Muzzy there, missing the Wild Growth this game around, just having to play the Hero Power out. Navi's hand is looking alright, but really is hoping to find an egg, and it just hasn't hit there. The Spider Bombs don't really get that much use in this matchup.
It's just too passive, I think, at the moment. You want to be aggressive in this matchup and start pushing for lethals that they can't deal with early on. And that's why Navi is forced here to just play the very sad 3-mana 3/3 vanilla Terrascale Stalker.
And the other unfortunate thing for Navi as well is those flanking strikes really don't find targets in this matchup. So they're more or less dead cards in his hand. Was really hoping to find the egg, didn't get it, so the Terrascale Stalker gets played out. Muzzy finally hitting that Wild Growth, and that will enable the Nourish on the following turn.
This is what happens when you play against a deck that runs like 6 or 7 minions, maybe tops, and the whole deck is your removal spells do very little, surprisingly, until right at the end when they're thrown down. They're big hitters in the late game with the Malagos and the Alexstrasza. But for Muzzy, once again, while the Wild Growth didn't come down at the perfect time, I think it's still good enough for him here with a Wild Growth and a Nourish to ramp him up towards potentially even just an Alexstrasza to face next turn, and pushing for an early lethal with this Mali Druid.
So with so little going on with NaviOOT's hand here, the Witchwood Grizzly and the Carnivorous Cube are the things that sing out to me. Do you feel like you have to play one over the other?
Not necessarily, because Cube could be decent on the Terrascale Stalker, but I think there's never going to be a point in the game where the Mali Druid has less cards in hand than right now. And for Navi, if he is expecting this to be such a dreadful position, I think he needs to anticipate, or at least pray, that he will do incredibly well with this Carnivorous Cube. That needs to hit a Witchwood Grizzly, or King Crush, or a High Main, just anything to really dominate this board.
So Muzzy, the Alexstrasza coming down on that turn, pushing Navi down to 15, which is a scary life total, especially in a deck that doesn't give you ways to pull that life total back until Deathstalker Rexa comes down, but it will enable NaviOOT's removal to finally find some value.
Yes, I suppose that's the one upside for Navi is
I'm
my
trying
opponent's.
to look for positives.
Yes, I can remove my opponent's giant minion. Fantastic. Then I'm going to die. As I really like Muzzy's line here, he's realizing the only heal in NaviOOT's deck is obviously the armor from Rexar and then potentially lifesteal afterwards once again, unless he's actually running Ziliax in his list, which I will quickly check. Yeah, okay, one copy of Ziliax there for Navi, which is potentially a little bit of heal, but basically, a lot of the time, Alexstrasza face into UI face here just wins him the game in 2 turns.
This
or
is
Dream Petal into reduced
I really
Malak.
like
Fair
the Dream
enough.
Petal here. This is a matchup where just playing Malagos by itself is a very risky move, just because of the single target removal that the Hunter does have at its disposal. So being able to put it down to 2, this is a perfect time for that. The Florist still demands an answer from Navi in some respect. And the Katrina now is going to be joining the board and pulling out the Witchwood Grizzly. He would have been hoping for the Charged Devil Sword to come out there.
Yeah.
Get that extra pressure on, especially given he could follow it up in a turn or 2 with the King Crush.
That could have been surprise lethal. Cube into play dead.
Yep.
Very scary indeed.
So, unfortunate for Navi, it was a 50-50 there with the other Witchwood Grizzly already being played, the King Crush in hand, but just wasn't meant to be. Now, the positive thing, of course, is that the Death Rattle is still active, so he can still get that Charged Devil Saw out, but he's really looking for something like another Play Dead to get the most value out of it.
And even then, if he attacked face with everything here, that's 12, another 8 from the Charged Devil Saw as it's pulled out, 20, plus a 14. I just don't even think he can get lethal on this turn, even if it was exactly perfect draws here of the second Play Dead.
Yes, and that will be game 3 to Muzzy with the way this is playing out. Malagos is discounted. The double swipes will enable 18 damage to face just out of hand. So with Navi on 9 and no way of protecting or healing himself on this turn, that will be game to Muzzy. But from Navi's perspective, you cannot just concede in this position. You have to figure out if there is a way that you can still win, and if so, how do you actually navigate that?
I have actually just counted it up, and I think if Navi had found the second Play Dead, that would actually have been lethal there on this turn. With the 8 and then 14 that comes with the 2 Devil Swords up. Just about would have got there. He has to go for this anyway.
Was there any problems with board size? No,
I don't think so, yeah. Which, you know, Muzzy, that is a very, very specific series of draws your opponent has to be hit. There wouldn't have been mana for Terrascale Stalker in amongst that instead of one of the Play Deads. So I think Muzzy was saying, on average, this is the most consistent line for me to win next turn and deny Rexar as an out, and that's exactly what Muzzy has done so beautifully here.
And here comes Malagos to close out the game and give Muzzy the lead 2-1. So this series, despite us talking about it being favoured for Navi in terms of the lineups, this went to 3-2 in the Swiss as well, and we expected it to be a close contest, and that's exactly how it's playing out.
It really is. Muzzy now left with only his Even Warlock up against the Cube Block. I think that's actually a pretty good matchup for the Even Warlock, because that will so often be decided by
whoever selects first. Doesn't win anything.
You know, Muzzy is kind of the quickest draw in the West with his plays. Like, you often don't get to see the card he's playing before he's already thrown it down.
I feel like that's a really bold statement to make when Casey's still left in the top 4.
Okay, well, Casey can be Lucky Luke, and then Muzzy can be whoever else is a cowboy. I don't know. Some other one.
The other cowboy.
The other cowboy. He can be Woody. There you go.
Oh, jeez, that's not a good cowboy.
I agree to disagree.
It's a toy.
What?
Alright, so game 4 is underway. Muzzy has a couple of Twilight Drakes in his hand, and I didn't quite catch what the last of it was, as I was dumbfounded by Derek's
my
casting.
idiocy. The old Derek Brown special.
And On Navi's side, he has found the Terrascale Squawker, which is one of those cards you're looking for early, but nothing to pair it with. The Howmaster Shore is a great card to put down early on, but only in the situation where Evenlock hasn't already got control of the board. So Vulgar Homunculus comes out here for Muzzy. And this is a matchup where playing those 2 drops is useful. And I mean that in the sense that playing them early is useful. The Spider Bombs are very scary, so anytime that even Warlock can build a slightly wider board and give odds for the Spider Bomb not to hit their big threats is very valuable.
I really like this from Muzzy because the temptation when you're going second on even Warlock is to tap 1 and 2 every time and hope to hit a Mountain Giant. But I agree that the 2 drops are good in this matchup. I think what more is the consideration for Muzzy is that Mountain Giants generally aren't that good. Is that if you go all in on hitting it on turn 3 and they have Hunter's Mark or Spider Bomb, you're pretty far behind. So going a little bit more even on this board, going wide instead of going tall with just 1 Mountain Giant is a good way, I imagine, for Muzzy to pull ahead.
So it was a very quick turn from Navi there with the Handmaster Shore coming down straight away. Do you want to walk me through why that was the case over something like a Hunter's Mark Spider Bomb?
Like, there's definitely consideration for Hunter's Mark Spider Bomb if you can start to clean up this board, but Houndmaster Shore, it's just pretty much being used here to clean up the board for its stats. It forces your opponent to trade in, which isn't great, but Navi realizes he needs to start clearing up the board for when Katharina comes down. That's already the cornerstone of his strategy here, is trying to just hit Katharina on curve, pull out a Devil Saw, a charged Devil Saw, sorry, or a Witchwood Grizzly, and go for lethal.
So the Grizzly coming into hand there seems like now the obvious choice to be played out on this turn. Just fits the curve nicely. And unfortunately, it is one of those matchups where the health total gets bumped down pretty significantly just because of hand sizes. So it will come out as a 3-6 in the current setting.
And if it was just 1 less health on the damaged Twilight Drake, you could then maybe guarantee its survival and go for a Grizzly into cube play. But without even a play dead, you're then leaving yourself vulnerable to silence. Everything here is just 1 card away, 1 health away from being really nice for Navi.
Even just 1 mana away. If he was on 6 mana here, he probably would be considering whether or not Hunter's Mark could be coming down this turn to try and prevent that Witchwood Grizzly from being cleared off. And it's quite interesting to see this happening to the Hunter. This is normally something we talk about with even Warlock, where because of the fact the deck is even overall, you can have these really awkward turns.
That's true.
In terms of 4-cost minions with 7 mana and trying to get a tap in and you don't have a 2-drop and all these weird things, but the shoe is on the other foot. And Navi playing out that Witchwood Grizzly, it can be eaten up by those Drakes, but take 1 in the process.
That is just the main reason why a lot of people are pretty down on Death Rattle Hunter is the vast majority of cards in the deck individually are not very good cards. You have the premium ones like Prince Keleseth, obviously. Flanking Strike is just a good card to dominate the board. But all the ones like Egg, Terrascale, Witchwood Grizzly, Cube, Charge Devil Saw, it's all combo cards. And when the combinations come together, it feels nigh on unbeatable. It's just insanely powerful. But in situations like this, when it doesn't come together, it's just not that strong.
So Muzzy here protecting the Drake and using the Spellstone. This to me is a nod for him playing around Spider Bomb.
Yes, I'll definitely agree with you there. He knows that given how many cards NaviOOT has just kept and not played for this long, he cannot go so tall on the board, which is, when we were discussing with the pro players down in the viewing area, a little bit of a point of contention that some players had with Faeli's play, where he was going so all in on the Lich King up against Tyler, when, again, single target removal is what Hunter does best.
Alright, so Spider Bomb, and it hits the target that Navi was looking for. A kind of forced play given the clunkiness of his hand, and hits the minion that he wants. So Muzzy on the flip side, his hand is now starting to look a little bit awkward itself.
The trade Mossy is obviously pretty bad because it destroys your own Mossy Horror.
Yes, those 2-drops, those Plated Beetles, great anti-aggro tools, but at this point in the game, you want to be doing something a little bit more powerful than that. The unbuffed Hook Reaver could come down as just a 4-4, and it looks like that may just have to be the case.
That's what I'm looking at here.
Trading the Drake into the Spider Bomb, playing the Hooked Reaver. Ooh. So the Mossy Horror might be coming down still. No? Oh, Hellfire. Okay. And then the Plated Beetle followed up. So this clears the board. You still get one of those plated beetles down, and with the other spellstone in hand, it buffs it up even further to deal with a big threat from Na'Vi, such as a charged Devil Saw.
Yeah, oh man, this was close. Like, you want to be proactive, but only developing a 4-4 into a 3-3 is not much. Your board is hardly better at all than your opponent's. And the fact that they have to deal 1 extra damage, you're not really pulling their mana away from anything better, because turn 7 is a very weak turn for the Death Rattle Hunter until they get Katharina in play. The upgrading of the Spellstone, I agree with you though, is a big part of Muzzy's consideration here.
So Muzzy's turn 7 starts it off with the Life Tap, seeing what else he can find on the deck, and a Mountain Giant is a good pull, but choosing to go for the Skulking Geist, we're starting to get into those turns where those 1-cost spells of Hunters become really powerful. So taking the safe play by getting the Geist down, and NaviOOT hits the minion he was looking for last series in the charged Devil Saw, a little bit too late for my liking, but is still powerful in this current board state.
Yeah, this is, again, this is what NaviOOT's whole game plan was revolving around. Saving the cubes so that he can go for cube on Devil Saw, or cube Katharina, cube King Crush, whatever. Just any big swing he can make to really dominate the board. He knew was his only chance of victory, because just going minion for minion, trading in the mid-game, nothing he was doing was broken enough. He needed those combos to come together like I was talking about.
Now we see Na'Vi proactively trading into the Skulking Geist there. Doesn't want to put doesn't want to put Muzzy down below 15 just yet to enable those hooked Reavers. Now the thing he was weighing up was whether or not you attack in with the Wolf, and he's looking at 20 health going, that makes me weak to Hellfire and like Vulgar Homunculus or Tap to activate that hooked Reaver. But the reality is, if he has a Hellfire here, I'm in a really bad spot anyway. You have to play into that a little bit and open yourself up to actually get this Carnivorous Cube online next turn.
The trade here for Na'Vi is just what made this turn go from amazing to terrible for Muzzy. If he'd gone face, we could have seen Hooked Reaver Spellstone on this turn for Muzzy, take out the Devil Saw, develop a nice big juicy minion, and be in no range of dying. But now for Na'Vi, that's all fallen apart. He can't go for a full value Spellstone on the Devil Saw because it only has 3 health. Does he want to go for that now? Hooked Reaver can't activate. This was a lovely decision here for NaviOOT to trade.
And it does prevent the Mountain Giant from coming down that turn. Instead, a much weaker play in Ooze Spellstone at least clears up the Devil Saw, preventing Cube from doing anything interesting, but a very weak turn in terms of Muzzy's own development.
So a full face play here for Na'Vi would allow Muzzy to go tap double Hooked Reaver, which is definitely something he's considering while making this play, because I think what he wants to do, if there was no, no Hooked Reaver, would be to go cube on the Katharina, flanking strike away the Ooze, and not even think about it.
So I really like the cube on the Katharina now. There's no way to effectively pop these cubes, in the sense that both playdeads are gone thanks to Skulking Geist, and the Terra Scale Stalker, that card is going to give me nightmares. There's only one left in the deck and obviously not in hand. Navi's now getting to the point in the game where he does need to find a way to put on pressure sooner rather than later. So getting the first cube out now, popping out a minion, and then enabling that second cube in the follow-up, I really like. Now still weighing up whether or not he should pop Muzzy down below 15, and I would like to see him hold off here. I just think with the current board, he can't deal with a Hooked Reaver, but with the second Carnivorous Cube coming down, he does have potential power plays in following turns.
I think I actually like going for the flanking strike play. I totally understand that the main consideration here is you want to be afraid of not giving them too much time. If they go Blood Reaver Gul'dan, then the game starts to get a little bit more difficult for you. But here, by not even going face at all, I suppose it develops enough minions to potentially develop lethal, but still doesn't put him in Hooked Reaver range. This is a nice middle road play.
Yes, I think developing the board, not putting your opponent below 15
is
what
that
he should be trying to do. Okay, sorry. So I was saying, should you consider attacking at all? And the answer is no, and then do you trade in or flanking strike? I think the flanking strike, as you said, is the correct call every time that you want to develop that board. And you have checked softly for the Hellfire on previous turns and seen that it wasn't there.
That's true.
So you can make a read that another Wolf on the board is a relatively safe play, as long as Muzzy hasn't drawn it in the next couple of cards. ...
Thinking. Yeah, really nice way for Muzzy to stem the bleeding a little bit, but he is still going to be real afraid of King Crush on one of these turns, be it through the summoning of Katharina, which again is inside that Carnivorous Cube, or just from face. If it comes out the hand, the 8 damage charging in would be very, very scary indeed for Muzzy.
So Muzzy here finally getting an opportunity to get that Mountain Giant down. The shields have come up. The Giant is going to be sitting in the way alongside that Plated Beetle. A big card for Na'Vi in terms of Spider Bomb, but not traditionally the card you want to be activating with the cube.
Yeah. And breaking open the cube into the Mountain Giant is not that bad, especially when you have Candle Shot. We could see attack in, get 2 Katharinas out, cube one of those Katharinas once again to get yourself the King Crush, I think guaranteed out of it at that point.
This is a big board, and now Na'Vi's probably at the point where, yeah, you definitely want to kill both of these minions, and I think you leave Muzzy at 20. You don't want to push him. Oh, you can put him to 18, and you're probably okay with that, because you still believe that there's not a Hellfire there, more likely than not.
Yeah. Or you could cube one of these Katharinas, summon King Crush.
King Crush, yeah. King Crush is coming out, so then you're definitely going to be pushing Muzzy as low as you can if the Crush is what comes out. And it is what comes out. So the steady shot straight away. And he is considering this, but I like the King Crush being sent to face here.
He's still thinking about it because he has lethal on board already. So he's saying, why would I give my opponent the ability to go double Vulgar Homunculus on the next turn?
That is very restrained play by Na'Vi.
It's very, very restrained. But what other punishes actually are there on this board? With Muzzy giving the concede there, I struggle to think of anything that could have saved him. Gul'dan wouldn't have been enough. There weren't any Defile clears either. It seems insane to not attack with King Crush when he's summoned, but I feel like it might have been correct.
Is that just because it's fun?
It's so fun.
Well, we could see not attacking did force the check Warlock, whereas their weakness, it's single target removal in these current decks. The Hellfires and Defiles are obviously there for wide boards, but not for tall boards. Muzzy has more tall threats in that early to mid game where Na'Vi doesn't. But once you get to the transition to that late game, Na'Vi has things like cubes that can just get that value that Muzzy will not be able to deal with. And so often this match comes down to, can Muzzy find those big threats early? Can Na'Vi answer them? And if he can answer them, transition successfully to the late game. Now there are things that can of course cause little hiccups along the way. With Doom Guards being run in Na'Vi's cube lock, there's all types of crazy burst potential that you just don't see in a normal even locking mirror.
And not just Doom Guards, Doomsayers are actually one of the most important cards that you can find for Na'Vi in the early turns, because that's one of the few ways that you can delay your opponent from going for Mountain Giant for a turn. And even though they have the ability to tap sooner and get the first Giant on board, if you can disrupt that and make sure that you are the first player to get Giant in play, you completely disrupt the flow of this matchup in your favor.
Now we are seeing one of the tech cards that Muzzy has in his deck that is very useful in this matchup, being that Sacrificial Pact can remove a demon for just 0 mana. So big card for Na'Vi as well, if you can find it, is the Skull of the Minari, something we haven't seen a lot of as a result of those nerfs. Muzzy does run double ooze, and more often than not it will get answered by the time you hit turn 5, but it is one of those cards where if you play it out and it doesn't get answered, it can just lead to the win for Na'Vi.
This is now, however, an interesting game where neither player have really drawn any of their best cards. No Mountain Giant for either player, no Skull for Na'Vi, as you pointed out. The Possessed Lackey is a good way to get things rolling on turn 6, but if Muzzy can find a Giant right now, then he might have been able to put on so much pressure that that wasn't a possibility. But now with his only turn 4 play, realistically, being Spellbreaker on this turn, which you never want to play early on against Cube Lock, this could not be much worse for Muzzy.
Yeah, this is a really tricky turn for Muzzy to consider here, but he's going to be restrained, play it longer, go for the life tap, and finds the ooze, and I believe he has to dump a card from his hand now, otherwise he will overdraw.
Defile.
The Defile, getting rid of one of those, is usually something we do see in these Warlock mirrors. The Defiles often don't have that much value. Oh, Na'Vi pulls the Mountain Giant, that's big. The Mountain Giant's going to hit the board. Na'Vi can clean up the 2/2s, and he is in a great position now.
He is. I'll agree with you. As coin into Possessed Lackey into Cube Pact on the next turn is looking like an amazing 1-2 punch for Na'Vi. The real trick, the saving grace here for Muzzy, is that Sacrificial Pact. If a Doom Guard is summoned out from the Possessed Lackey, he can gobble it up straight away and hope to make a big swing back in his favor.
Yes, you say that, but this Mountain Giant has...
Yes.
gonna hit face a lot of times in the interim. And I was gonna say that if this continues to be slow, then Na'Vi has the advantage as we transition. It's exactly what we talked about. Na'Vi's deck is gonna be better going on, Muzzy's better early. So in the situation where they both miss early, Na'Vi's still probably favoured, especially given he did have the Possessed Lackey, the Cube, and the Dark Pack already in hand. And these turns just feel so bad if you're in Muzzy's shoes.
They really do. Having to throw down an Ooze here just to clear up room in your hand. It even came out in the wrong order for him because he wanted to find any other 2-drop. Now for Na'Vi, the double Doom Guard being found there isn't actually that bad for him because it means he gets a definite Void Lord out of the deck, which is less devastating if Muzzy Sacrificial Pacts it because you, again, still get the 3 Void Walkers out. And he can just start hitting Muzzy in the face with these Doom Guards as well. They could just be played from the hand as 5 attack charges.
Yeah, I wonder if Na'Vi's even weighing up playing one this turn.
Wow.
The likelihood that you discard the other is quite low. But there's just so many high-value cards where if you hang on to them, you win. Like, Giant to face Cube and then Dark Pack just to make more Giants. I feel like it's a great play, especially when Sacrificial Pact is in your opponent's deck. And that's exactly what Na'Vi does. He's saying, it's turn 6, you can play your Hooked Reaver if you like. I've got 2 of these Giants, they can handle that, no worries.
This beautifully plays around 2 of Muzzy's cards in the Sacrificial Pact and the Skulking Geist. You don't play a Demon, and you play the Dark Pact before he can destroy it with the Skulking Geist. And it's looking to me now like there is pretty much nothing that Muzzy can do to fight back. He throws down the Vulgar Homunculus, but it's not enough.
This is just lethal. Na'Vi's going to take this series 3-2. He plays out the Doom Guard for some style points, and those Giants are going to face. What a win by Na'Vi.
This was definitely the way we were expecting it to go towards the start, but it looked for a while like Muzzy might be pulling off the surprise upset in this very unfavourable series, but in the end, the even Warlock letting him down pretty big time.